episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime on trending criminal cases. And this has been a story that's really been in the news since about 2023, when that video of Cassie really became prominent, and Sean Diddy Combs abusing her in the hallway of the Hotel Intercontinental in Century City, which is where one of our guests comes to from today. It is hard to believe, but it is week 6, day 24 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. The United States government, of course, taking on Sean Diddy Combs. And today, really the big news wasn't so much the testimony as it was about the jurors, although some of the testimony, which wasn't witness testimony, but I guess a better way to put it is some of the evidence. Some freak-off video was shown today, and apparently some of the reactions to the jurors was pretty interesting. But we saw some more text messages. We heard more about one of Diddy's favorite drugs, Molly. And again, that sealed hotel footage, which was shown just to the jurors, and some more blackmail threats. Without further ado, let me introduce the guest to you. We've got a new best guest, Dante Pointer. Great name. I love it. Welcome to have him. Sharp-dressed man. He is an award-winning, nationally recognized attorney out of the Bay Area that has represented families and individuals for over 15 years, and it's resulted in some of the highest verdicts and settlements in the nation. Next up, you've got Nima Rahmani, a prestigious California personal injury attorney. The guy graduated UCLA when he was 19, Harvard Law at 22. And last but certainly not least, because she's got all the info, Lauren Conlon coming to us. She's an investigative reporter, as I said. She contributes to Crime Stories or whatever the latest show that Nancy Grace has, because she has more shows than I've got. I don't know what, but she's got a lot of shows is the point. And Lauren has also done extensive reporting on the Grant Solomon case, which we've covered here. Which I didn't know until she and I talked about this in New York, but more than 60 episodes on that case. So let's jump right into it. And Lauren, are you fatigued at this point? Week 6, date. You had a weekend, but you've got the kids, from what I understand, and the hubby's on the road. So
I know the nerve.
You've got to be exhausted. But what was the atmosphere like today? Actually, let's go back. Was it Friday that Ye showed up? I think his new name is now Ye. That's what he wants us.
So it was it last Thursday or Friday? Now I can't even remember. I think it might have been Friday. You're right. But it was really strange, and I still I don't know the truth behind it. I did speak to Diddy's very close friend, Charlucci, who has been in the courtroom every day and obviously is connected to Ye. The guys at the courthouse told me he wasn't on the list. And Joel, you know that you got to be on that list to get in. I mean, you are well aware of this. I was
maybe unless you're Ye, but everyone else has got to be on that list. The whole problem here is this celebrity worship, and now they're letting this guy into the courtroom when he's not supposed to be in the courtroom. But go ahead, Lauren.
Well, I mean, he didn't. So as far as we were aware in the courtroom, the guys were like, no, he has to go to overflow. He has to go to overflow. And when I spoke to Charlucci was like, well, he didn't want to make a big scene. And I was like, okay, Kanye all of a sudden doesn't want to make a big scene. Sure. So he said he doesn't want to make a big scene, but he wants to show his support. So he was going to go in the courtroom, but then he decided to go to overflow. And look, Joel, he stayed for about 20 minutes. And then he and Christian Combs went to lunch. So, I mean, it was a whole show, just watching him get out of the car. That's really what it was. But he's the only friend that showed up for Diddy besides Charlucci at this point.
Yeah, and Charlucci, he's been there every day. I think he told me
Every
when
day.
I spoke to him there that he's one of Sean Combs' son's godfathers, and he's been there with a free Diddy shirt. But
Mhm.
Adante, to you, just before we get into the particulars, Adante, I don't know how closely you've been following it, but just from sort of a 30,000-foot view of this, what's your take so far? I mean, got obviously the RICO charges that seem the hardest to be able to prove, and I told Nima this, that even having had it explained to me 10,000 times, I'm still not sure exactly what we need to get from the jurors on this. And then, of course, the sex trafficking charges with fraud, force, and coercion, which they seem, in my opinion, to be proving. But what are your thoughts from sort of a bird's eye view of this?
Well, you mentioned, Emma, how closely I've been following it. I don't think many people can avoid this trial unless you completely shut off all your friends, family, coworkers, because there's some aspect of this trial that's somebody in your day is going to bring up, even if it's just to say no Diddy. But anyway, from a 30,000 kind of foot level, the government has been, parading a stream of witnesses up there, talking about all kind of sordid things. But what I think is pretty interesting, and I wonder how the jury is grappling with this, is there's kind of these conflicting narratives that are being woven at this point. Prosecution saying this is a terrible guy, he's beating up people, he's using his money, he's using his resources, bodyguards, and blowing up cars and dangling people off roofs, off of balconies. And then you have the defense attorneys who are standing up there saying, well, despite people going through all type of horrendous acts, you're still sending text messages and social media posts saying I love you and I support you and I'm your best friend, and even asking for these hotel and freak off nights, or saying that they had a good time. So how do you reconcile that? I think that's really what the jury is going to be dealing with, and I think a lot of that is going to come, unfortunately, from what they come into the jury room or into the courtroom predisposed to think about how victims are supposed to behave and the way in which men and women may interact when there's these type of power dynamics.
And that's an amazing point. That's something I've been talking about and asking about from day one of this case. Brianna's in our chat all the time, otherwise known as Bree. She's got maybe the most important question of the day. Wants to know if you are related to the Pointer sisters, having the same
I
last
get
name.
that. I get that question pretty frequently, and I am, but do not ask me to sing. I did not
Eh,
get that talent. But
Oh,
yes,
so you are related.
we're all from Oakland. Yes, yes.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Who knew? Good question then. Um, they also want to know, second most important question, if you've ever been yelled at by Nancy Grace.
I have not been yelled at by Nancy Grace. I got to
Well,
check. I guess I got to check that off the bucket list at some point,
yeah,
right?
Lauren Conlon can arrange for that. Trust me, she can arrange for that. And I might be able to put in an assist there. So Nima, before I was going to get to what I was going to get to with you, which is the juror, Adante brings up a good point, and I think we are obviously hearing so much about this verbal abuse and the physical abuse, but we're also hearing, as recently as today, in text messages and in witness testimony, that these women continually returned to Sean Diddy Combs. And I think it was Mia who even returned for employment on 3 separate occasions over a period of like 10 or 12 years. How are the jurors going to reconcile this with the fraud, force, or coercion?
Joel, that's really the biggest question in the case, and really what the defense did in the Harvey Weinstein case. And that question is this: if you're abused, if you're sex trafficked, if you're sexually assaulted, why do you continue going back to your abuser? Listen, I believe the victims. I'm just telling you that's the most difficult question the jurors are going to have to grapple with in this case. So Cassie's emails and text messages, not good. Mia staying employed, not good. Jane having this love contract where she's paid $10,000 a month and she's talking about her Van Cleef necklace and her bags, not good. So this is the one thing, though, I might disagree with you, Joel. I think it's easier to prove RICO than sex trafficking in this case. And this is why. There's a path to racketeering through arson, through bribery, through extortion, through drug trafficking, through many other crimes, right, including witness intimidation and obstruction. probably why victim 3, Gina, didn't show up. She's either paid off or scared or embarrassed. So I think if the prosecutors handle this correctly, first of all, I think prostitution's in the back, the Mann Act. Obviously, that wouldn't be a win for the government. They got to get either RICO or they got to get sex trafficking. I think they can argue in closing, like, look, there's this laundry list of other crimes, right? She shook down Regina Ventura, right? She blew up Kid Cudi's car. He paid $100,000 to the security guard at the Intercontinental Hotel. There's all these other RICO predicate acts that even if you believe that this was all transactional or this was consensual or these victims knew what they were getting themselves into when they participated in the freak offs or hotel nights or king nights or whatever you call them, you can still get RICO without sex trafficking.
Yeah, and my ears just perked up when you said that, because you're the only person I think who has said that, at least on my show, to me. So let me go back in reverse here to Adante. Do you agree with that, Adante, that the RICO charges are going to be easier to prove? Because I've heard everyone just, it's not that it can't be proven, it's just that it appears to be such a nebulous charge. Like the definition of it seems to confuse so many people, including myself.
Yeah, I think so. Two things. One is, the prosecution, in terms of the evidence, they're reading receipts. They have his workers or employees talk about what they've done to further the criminal enterprise. The criminal enterprise being sex trafficking and so on and so forth. So I think the government's done a good job with the physical receipts, documents, text messages showing that his staff was involved with it. The question, though, is still, to me, is do people align those activities up with the violence, with the sexual, behavior going on, and say that those two were essentially co-joined? And once again, if a juror is sitting there and they're saying these women were a part of this stuff, they wanted to join this lifestyle. They may not have liked it, but they exchanged for whatever the benefits they thought they would get. I still see, yes, they might get point A of RICO, but I don't know if they cross the bridge to it actually being a conviction, unanimous conviction at that in federal court.
Time is obviously going to tell with that, and Lauren, to you, I don't know if you know the answer to this. I mean, we had that one psychologist on who apparently testified in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, but as far as from what I remember, she wasn't allowed to specifically talk about coercive control. And I don't think there's been a quote unquote coercive control expert. Do we know why, like specifically, that is not allowed to be brought into, testimony at this trial?
I mean, that was a really tough day to listen to, Dr. Don Hughes. It was weird. Diddy actually brought in this attorney, Jonathan Bach, for this day and for Dr. Don Hughes specifically, and we haven't really seen him again, but it was full of sidebars, full of objections, because they had so many issues with Dr. Don Hughes talking about all of this without have treated, I guess, any of the survivors, even though that's the expert's job, of course. But they actually wanted to call her back after Jane, and the judge denied that, just saying, like, she's no more important than any other witness. That would, be bad for the defense. That wouldn't necessarily be fair. But I guess my question here, and maybe, it's for the lawyers, and if you don't mind, I love to come on your show and ask these questions, because I'm curious. But I feel like what they are trying to do with the sex trafficking with Diddy and these text messages, let's say that we've seen from Diddy to Jane after she told him that she never really wanted to do this. And this was after Cassie's lawsuit came out, and she kind of said, yeah, I read through the whole thing. I felt like I was looking at my own story. And then she tells him all these things. She felt exploited. She felt this, she felt that. And Diddy says, oh, I had no idea. I didn't realize, et cetera, et cetera. Don't you have to have a guilty mind to also be convicted of sex? Like, I guess my whole thing is what he did to these, like to Cassie in particular, especially, was god awful. Like, no one should ever go through that. But in order to get a sex trafficking conviction, wouldn't he have to know he was doing that? I don't know. I mean, or no, I have no idea.
Dante, you want to take that?
So I would say this, it all comes down to what's in the jury instruction. And I don't necessarily believe that you have to have the state of the specific intent to do what he's accused of. You have to simply intend to engage in those activities. And those activities, sending the text, paying the money, selecting the sex worker, flying the sex worker out, putting up their lodging and paying money, for their services. You don't have to necessarily say, I'm engaging in sex trafficking right now to be convicted of sex trafficking. You have to intend the actions and the behavior and the conduct, but you don't necessarily have to have the state of mind to know, oh, if I do these 3 things, I'm going to be considered a sex trafficker.
That's interesting.
Helpful.
Lauren, back to you. So last week, and we're going to get into juror number 6 today, who was kicked off of the case, and we'll tell you why in just a moment. But I think last week there was something like a 2-hour, sidebar, for lack of a better term, before court even began, and a lot of reporters, and obviously you're in there, but we're not, across the board from what I was reading, we're talking about Diddy's demeanor. He seemed really agitated. He was pointing. He was gesticulating. Have you seen? I mean, does he appear to be even keel? Have there been moments where he's getting upset? People can't get in there, so if you can, just paint the picture of what it has been like inside that courtroom as it pertains to Diddy and his actions.
Sure. Well, last week, I believe it was the same day that there was this 2-hour robing room meeting, but Diddy I don't want to say he got admonished again. A few days earlier, he was admonished about nodding at the jury, or maybe it was the week prior during Brianna Bongolan's cross-examination, because you guys know Nicole Westmoreland kind of impeached her on the date of this photo, and he was nodding at the jury, kind of making eye contact with them. He got reprimanded, and the judge said, if you do this again, you're out. Well, last week, Maureen Comey, when the jury left, she was like, so I can't see behind me, but basically my team is telling me that he's still nodding during cross and during this and that, but not looking at the jury. And I'm watching him, and he wasn't looking at the jury, but he can't really help himself but nod. And the judge actually agreed with that. He was just like, look, there's going to be reactions from him, but he knows to be careful. Now, what I will say at this point, when the jury walked in this morning and he knew that juror number 6 was gone, and the defense fought tooth and nail, right, to keep this juror, he looked down and he just kind of shook his head in like disgust here. So I was like, oh man, they are taking this hard. They are taking it really hard.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the stuff inside the courtroom is so important. And obviously the federal courthouses and even the state courthouses in New York, no cameras. So you don't really know what's going on. And that's, I think, by the way, if there were cameras, there'd be 10 times, even though there's so much interest in this, it'd be 10 times the interest if you could get in there and you were getting these clips, on the, I don't know how important the nightly news is anymore, but you get what I'm saying. But Nima, to you. So let's get to juror number 6. Today, this was a juror who was, in question over the last couple of days. Judge Arun Subramanian officially removes the juror from the trial today. Turns out he's a 41-year-old black male who apparently was giving conflicting answers about his residence. So, you've got to be inside in New York State, and apparently there was someone who pointed out that maybe he was in New Jersey, and then I think he got nervous with the judge questioning him and was fumbling with the answers, and ultimately the judge had to make a decision and decided to remove him. To you, Nima, I mean, obviously, it's a very serious issue because, all this stuff comes up on appeal, and he's got to preserve the record and make sure everything is kosher and all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Was there any alternate way to deal with this, or was this the only way the judge could deal with this?
This is the only way, Joel, because this is someone that's not qualified to be on the panel if he lives out of state. And we call it lack of candor, but really that means that he's lying. So, and this juror number 6, obviously black male, 90s hip hop fan, right, is chatting it up with the court staff and tells them that he lives in New Jersey. They report it back to the judge. Now, Lauren's in the courtroom, and a lot of my other friends are in the courtroom, and they're saying that this is a favorable juror. He's been nodding back during some of the favorable defense testimonies. So obviously, the prosecution wants him off. You know, the former prosecutor and me would also want him off. So they're doing what they can. The defense thinks this is a good juror for them, could potentially hang the panel. So they're fighting tooth and nail to keep him on. So then the discussion is, well, where do you get your mail? He's like, you know, I live in New Jersey, but I'm there in New York 4 days a week. That's where my job is. So after all that, you know, the judge actually takes the weekend to think about it. But today, a really big day for the prosecution. Probably the highlight of today wasn't the testimony or the text messages or the calendar and the meeting. It was juror 6 getting off, and the potential for another juror who's been talking to a former colleague about the case to get off as well. Because as we lawyers know, especially a case like this, when it comes down to issues of gender violence, where jurors bring all sorts of, you know, outside experiences into that courtroom, jury selection is the most important thing in almost any case, but especially in a case like this, where there are a lot of people that believe that the victims lie, and there are other people that believe that victims underreport or they don't report at all, and that's why this is all happening. So big win for the prosecution today, Joel.
Yeah, and I'm going to get back to Dante on this, but Lauren, can you kind of just flesh out? So the way I heard it was that literally the government kind of overheard this at some point. It wasn't like they were looking for it. And then you see Coco here. How could a New Jersey resident get a New York jury summons? Which is a good question. But do we know any of the backstory and how this even came to the attention of both the government and eventually the judge?
Yes, Nima, I believe, said it. This guy was joking with one of the jury staff members, and he said this. He said, "Oh, yeah, I stay with my girlfriend and my daughter in New Jersey half the time," or whatever it was he said. But I believe this question, how could a New Jersey resident get a New York jury summons? He originally stated that he lived in the Bronx with his aunt. So they went back and they looked at the transcripts from the voir dire. They actually questioned this guy twice. And the judge on Friday actually said that he believed this guy was, quote, shading his answers to actually stay on the jury. And I think that's what really got him, essentially, is like, yes, this was inconsistent, but you're right. We weren't looking for this. Or the prosecution said we weren't looking for this. But Brian Steele made this point like, oh, you guys want him off now after we're halfway done this trial and you've had a chance to see his facial expressions and this and that. And I watch this guy. This guy he was in my view every day, and he was reactive. He's one of the handful of jurors who actually show reactions. But my whole thing about him is, maybe I'm wrong, but he always looked extremely stressed. He looked very upset watching the CNN Cassie beatdown video. He would look at the clock a lot, like, I want to get out of here. So I don't know what that means exactly. Maybe, but I'm just saying, like, it might not have been the case that he was totally for the defense or the government. Who knows?
Yeah, and he's probably stressed because he's got to commute his ass in from New Jersey, not New York, and that is a horrible commute that I used to do, and I don't wish that on anyone.
There you go. Yeah.
So Dante, this is a good point. A lot of people don't know this, but in the federal system, the judge actually picks the jurors, and in this case, it was Judge Arun Subramanian. So I think he's, I don't know, a little upset with himself, maybe, that he didn't catch this earlier, and we're in week 6 now.
Well, in a federal case, the judge does the voir dire, but the attorneys also get to weigh in on a much shorter window than in state court. I'm not sure how the judge can catch it. So I'd imagine he himself isn't blaming himself for this juror making it on to the jury. The issue really is, to me, is people have all kind of complicated living situations, especially when you have a job that might be in one place, but you have family in another place. And as you mentioned, that commute is brutal. He may be staying in both places. And I could imagine being, under the watchful glare of media, the public, and the judge being grilled on where you're at. I wasn't in the courtroom, so I unfortunately didn't get a chance to hear his, response or how he tried to explain it. But I think what Diddy's defense team is bringing up is important. And from what I read, the prosecution struck upwards of a dozen or more Black or African American potential jurors from the panel. And then you get one that makes it on the panel that I'm aware of, and there's some confusion that seems it would have been able to be worked out with asking him to produce some additional proof of his residence. And that doesn't sound like that was the option that was exercised. And instead, as you mentioned, you let this juror go through, maybe show his cards on where he's leaning or not, and then you kick him off the panel, and the Black guys were replaced with the white guy. That opens it up to me to a ripe appellate issue. If I'm Diddy's appellate staff, I'm writing that brief as we speak.
And I believe the case law on that, is it Braxton? Is that Batson? I'm sorry. I knew I was going to get that wrong. So Nima, tell us what that is, because, well, before you do that, so the juror who is now replaced, this African-American juror, is a 57-year-old white male accountant from Westchester, which is...
He's not white, though. Sorry to interrupt you. He's not white.
Well, let us know. That's what I...
Well, he might be of Middle Eastern descent, but he's definitely not like a typical white guy, unless my eyes are bogus, which they could be, but he was not white.
That's interesting.
I stared at him most of the day. Now I'm where are you getting this from? Because now I'm like, am I crazy?
Well, from a couple of different outlets. So, I mean, but listen,
white?
Lauren, we all know that reporters can be wrong. So I'm not, I'm going to go with whatever observations you're making. It's just hard, I don't know. I looked at 3 different sources for this tonight.
And they said white. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'll take a closer look tomorrow. I didn't think he was white, but
yeah, I mean, you could very well be right and let us know. But Naima, I mean, to Adante's point, you've got a Black guy who was on the jury who seems to be a legit juror, except for the checking of the residence, which seems still a little murky at this point. And you replace him with a 57-year-old guy who some are reporting is a white guy. Others are saying maybe not. But nevertheless, in a case like this, I mean, race is important. I mean, I don't think that race is not important. I think that it's something that they're going to look at. To Dante's point, on an appeal, they're going to bring it up. Why are you striking the Black jurors with a Black defendant? Isn't that true?
Look, it's an issue on appeal. So let's take a step back. Race, of course, is a big issue. Tenny Garagos' father, Mark Garagos, was talking about the racial makeup of the jury during jury selection, and that was an issue. So let's talk about this new juror, right? Whether he's white or Middle Eastern, accountants tend to be good prosecution jurors. He's got an engineering degree, also tends to be good for the prosecution. Again, these are gross stereotypes, right? I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
All the cases I prosecuted, you want those kind of engineers and accountants on your jury if you are the prosecution. So you have a Batson challenge, right? So this is how it works. Once a party makes this challenge, right, and they're saying that, and this typically happens during jury selection when you're exercising your strikes, your peremptories, right? Then the judge will take a look and they said, well, look, is there, a bona fide challenge? Was this racially motivated? Then the burden shifts to the other party to provide a race neutral reason. The reason I think this is going to withstand appeal is if this juror really lives out of state, he's not qualified just as a matter of law to sit on this one. It has to be someone from your community, not someone from another district, not someone from another state. So if the judge found, and let me tell you, on the record today, Judge Subramanian ruled that this has nothing to do with race. It just really has to do with his residence. So he made that finding, and he found as really a matter of law that this juror 6, lived outside the district. He's not qualified on that basis. It may have been an appellate error to actually keep him on the panel, a non-qualified juror. So I think this was the right move. Of course, the defense, they're going to raise every objection that they possibly can, so they have a shot when this case inevitably goes up to the Second Circuit. But I think this was the right ruling today, Joel.
Yeah, and I'd like to get a Dante's take on it. By the way, Nora says, what's the address on his paychecks or his driver's license? I'm sure they're looking at all of that. But Jennifer Reynolds to a Dante, why does it always have to be a race thing? And what I was just saying, I am very confident that the jurors are not going to decide this based on race, but I think race is something that, you can't just put in a corner and pretend is not there, because there was an issue during jury selection that the defense brought up with striking black jurors. So the question here is, why does it always have to be a race thing with the defense? Diddy does not have a single African-American lawyer on his team. Come on. What's your reaction? That's not true, by the way, right, Lauren? He had
No,
at
he has
least two.
two.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Dante, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it doesn't always have to be a race thing, but when you see a prosecutor striking, like I said, upwards of 12, I believe I read 17 African Americans from the jury, and then the one that makes it, there's some issues. I don't know if it's a race thing, but it's one of several factors. And when you look at, if you're going to take into account, for example, picking the jury, their occupation or their age, why would you now so not consider the fact of their race? And yes, Diddy may have black attorneys. Diddy himself is a black guy. Hey, his name and his brand transcended, the culture, helped set the culture in a lot of people's ways. So I think he has a lot of appeal in that way. And he's facing a much harder hill to climb than just him being African American or black. Right now, he's on video battering, abusing, disrespecting women, and doing a bunch of things, at least from the testimony, that most people would never stand for. However, we also have a president who's, been convicted of multiple felony accounts and things like that. So perhaps that in and of itself isn't a disqualifier, race, education, and or your behavior. It remains to be seen how the jury sorts through all of this evidence.
Yeah, and Lauren, I'm coming to you in a second, but Nima, to you, can you just clarify, because I was told by a few people that it is the judge who ultimately picks the jurors in the on the federal level. I had someone correct me in the chat saying no, it's the attorneys. Can you set the record straight, counselor?
Yes. So it's called jury selection, but it really should be jury deselection. So normally in either state or federal court, the judge asks the questions first, right? Tell me, your occupation, where you live, what your spouse does, do you have any strong feelings about this case? Law enforcement, everyone that's been on jury duty knows those questions, right? In federal court, the judge does the vast majority of the questioning. Now, the lawyers can submit questions. Depending on the judge can also allow attorney voir dire for the lawyers to ask their own questions. In state court, you always get attorney voir dire. The judge goes, the lawyers go. Then the judge starts first. The judge will remove any jurors that he or she believes can't be fair and impartial. And you get an unlimited number of those strikes. Those are for cause challenges, right? Then the parties get a certain number of strikes for any reason or no reason at all, as long as it's not race or some other constitutionally prohibited category like religion or sex. Then the jurors that are left after these strikes happen, those are the juries that end up on the panel. So they're not actually chosen. It's just they're the ones that are left over after these cause challenges happen and these peremptory strikes.
Lauren, to you, so Anima kind of teased it. There's now another juror who is kind of in a gray area, because apparently, according to people in the courtroom, this juror has been talking or talked at some point to a colleague of his and was sharing information. And obviously, they're not supposed to be talking about this case to anybody. Do we know the juror number, who this juror is, and what is going on?
We really don't. What you just said is pretty much the extent of it. I thought maybe they would discuss it after the testimony, so I was sitting there waiting. I could have ran out, but I thought we were going to hear about this juror, and we didn't. So I'm sure the judge is going over everything like he did before, crossing his T's, dotting his I's, and then hopefully we'll figure out what's going on tomorrow. But that would be crazy. But also, you have to think, I mean, jurors are humans. Do you really think they're going home and not, I don't know, maybe not, but right? Do we think they're maybe talking about this or looking at a few headlines? Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, the reporting again, and I guess it's suspect to say the least, but and this is three different mainstream sources, but apparently this juror was asked to turn over their phone to the judge. Do we know if that happened? You don't know.
I did not hear that. I mean, I don't know if that was early this morning. I mean, I got on a little bit later today. I probably missed like 15 minutes, but I did not hear that. But I guess who reported that? Just curious.
I have to go. Honestly, I have to go back
Okay.
and look.
I
I'll
was
let
just
you know after
wondering,
the
just
show. Yeah.
because everybody's sitting around me, so I'm just wondering if maybe. But yeah, no, I would believe that if this was a phone issue or something with social media or their employer, then yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And by the way, this is another reason I hate the fact that these cases are not open to the public in the sense of having cameras in there, because then it's like a game of telephone and you hear, oh, this guy's a 57-year-old white accountant, and someone said he's not even an accountant, and Lauren's like he's not even white. So
Don't quote me on that. It could be my eyes. I'm really sorry. Now I feel bad because I'm like, I thought he was, yeah.
I will not hold it against you if that's not the
Please.
case. But when Judge Subramanian, who by the way I thought was fantastic when I was up in New York for that week, but when he announced that he was striking this juror from the trial, what was his demeanor like? Is he getting annoyed? I don't know.
No, he wasn't getting annoyed, and I mean, his decision was made, and that was that. And he's very patient with ongoing arguments. I mean, when I say ongoing, I mean like each side has already argued twice. He will allow a third go at it. And so again, he's very patient. But I think at this point, since we thought the juror was going to be dismissed officially Friday, and as you pointed out, he said, okay, thank you, Mr. Donaldson, for your argument. I'll take the weekend. That was pretty shocking, I think, to a lot of us that he actually extended that much grace. So this morning when he dismissed him, it was just business as usual. Goodbye. End of story.
Oh, look at this. Wendy Marino, I'm an accountant. I budget my monthly bills. The COE and I might need to hire you. It's a little ongoing problem with us, but I don't mean to bring in family dynamics. Dante, back to you here. What about the issue now of other jurors, needing to know that one of their fellow jurors has been taken off the case? How sensitive do you need to be with how that is explained? From what I understand, there's a very sort of benign response given to them, but you can't be specific. How is this handled?
Yeah, the jury will be told that juror, I believe it was number 6, has been excused, thanked for their service and excused, which is a very general, nebulous kind of thing. The judge isn't going to go in to the justifications. The judge may give some sort of admonishment about a general admonishment saying, hey, jurors, we want to remind you that you took an oath to follow the rules. If you think you're going to have a problem following those rules, please let us know. That type of thing. So the jury won't necessarily know, although they're not supposed to be following the media and the press, not supposed to be talking to friends and family about what's going on. But could you imagine, and this is where, I always have to talk to my own clients. We get ready for trial and things like that. I'm like, people don't stop being human just because they walk through the courthouse door. You're on what is arguably the biggest trial right now. You're going through all this fanfare to get in to the courthouse. You have information that people are dying to hear about just from your observations. And if they get even the slightest wind, you haven't been at work, they think you might be on the trial. You think no one's reaching out to you to just get a sense as to what's going on? So, I think it's be pretty tough for juries just to completely sequester themselves, but that's what they're being asked to do.
Yeah. And if you go up north like 6 hours or 5 hours to Dedham, Mass, they're deliberating in a Karen Reed verdict. And today they've got a gazillion people who are demonstrating in favor of the defendant. And it has me thinking, is this impacting the jurors? They can hear this outside. They talked about this at the first trial. So they are no doubt influenced, these jurors, not just in this case, but other cases. And this was the question here. I assume the answer to this, Nima, can a jury be sequestered for a federal case? That is a yes.
That is a yes. but people don't want to serve as jurors already, right? So if you sequester them, you take away their cell phones, you keep them from their friends and family for 2 months. I mean, imagine the response rate. So that's really the only way to deal with it. I mean, Lauren and Adante are right. I mean, you're talking about ordinary people, right? They have lives, they have jobs, they have family, you know, waiting for them when they get home. Is it realistic to think they're not going to go on X or, you know, talk to someone about it? Probably not, but you know, it sounds like this other juror was pretty chatty. If you're talking to a, you know, a former coworker, you're probably talking to everyone. This isn't just pillow talk with, you know, your spouse at night, right? Or secretly, you know, doing something on your phone while you're in the bathroom, right? This is probably someone that's talked to more than one person, which you're really not supposed to do. It's one of the clear admonishments. The judge says, don't talk about the case, don't deliberate. Because really, you got to decide the case solely based on the facts and evidence in the case. That's what the rules of evidence are. You can't be getting all the speculation and innuendo and all the rumors out there on social media, right? As far as all these other people involved in the freak-offs and who's the unnamed rapper, right, in Las Vegas, right? Who else was present? You can't be doing all that. So,
yeah. I have a feeling that might be yay, but don't come after me, yay. Do they need to check Adante now? Does the judge have to go through all the other jurors and make sure that they're actually living in New York? Is that something that he's going to do? I don't want to keep harping on juror number 6, but he doesn't want to get in a situation like a week from now where he finds out juror 71 is living in Connecticut, right, and commuting down to Manhattan. So is he having his clerk or assistant, whoever it might be, looking to make sure that the rest of these jurors right now are quote unquote okay to be there?
All the jurors are potential jurors that made it into the courtroom on the panel to be voir dired were already supposed to be vetted to make sure that they were qualified to be called as jurors in this district, in this federal district. So I don't believe the judge is going to go back and double check their homework unless he's prompted to by something else coming to his attention, somebody else either tipping the courthouse off by, you know, sending something saying, hey, this is my neighbor. I see him every morning commuting from New Jersey. But unless something like that happens, the judge is going to assume that his staff has done their job and everybody there is qualified to be there and they reside in this particular district.
Yeah. So Lauren, I'm curious because, as you know, I was there the first week and I'm sort of missing it there. And there was maybe a rumbling for a second. We can ask the attorneys this. I don't think Diddy's taking the stand, but maybe they have something else to say. But outside of that, I don't think I'm heading back up to New York. But how has the atmosphere changed from week one, just in general? What's it like inside the courtroom? Are there a lot less people? What's it like outside? I guess the line waiters are all gone, I would assume, but give us a picture of what's going on around there.
Yes, it's definitely died down. I mean, today, you know, you mentioned, yeah, my husband's out of town, so I had to bring my kids to camp this morning. So I couldn't get there at 6 a.m. I've been getting there 6:15, 6:20, and I've been like 21, the last press person to get in the courtroom, which is crazy. But today, crazy. I get there at 8:45, 8:50. There were 3 spots left in the courtroom. So I ended up getting in, and then word traveled. So people from the overflow started to come up and try to get in. But I think it's because, you know, at this point, I don't want to sound insensitive, but we've heard like the juicy witnesses with the salacious testimony that everybody wants to hear to get their headlines out, you know, and to sell their stories. And now we're at the very tedious testimony with the experts and the summary witnesses. And so, I mean, people were, I hate to say it, but they were kind of falling asleep today, jurors included. I saw some eyes closed. They quickly opened back up. There was a moment when these 3 videos were played. You're probably getting to that at some point. I'm not sure, but
yeah.
Okay, so I can stop or let me know if I should. I know I'm so used to Nancy Nema. I'm like, should I stop? Should I stop? I don't want to go too far ahead. Yeah, I don't want to.
Nancy will like completely just like yell at us and cut us off. So.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I'll stop. I'm like, Joel, should I keep going?
Lauren, this is called NG PTSD, Nancy Grace PTSD.
No,
she suffers from.
I don't want to jump ahead, but yeah.
I'll bring us to that in 1 second.
Okay.
But to Nema here from Jazzy, By the way, I've been yelled at by Nancy a few times. It's kind of fun, actually. Has the government? It was having a mother that yells at you every day, like me, prepares you for Nancy Grace is nothing compared to my mom. My mom would yell at Nancy Grace, and I would love to see it.
So funny.
Jazzy here. Has the government seized any of Diddy's assets, or for now, can he continue to spend his money any way he chooses? Nima, a lot of people have asked me this. You know, the government. You always hear the government seizes your assets. What is going on in that regard? And if you want to hear my mom yelling at me, Lucy H is ordering the book. It is my mom's child Holocaust story, and that's about 20%. 80% is her giving life advice and yelling at me. But go ahead, Nima.
Yeah, so you can have a prejudgment forfeiture, especially in a RICO case. We haven't seen it yet, but here's the two ways you get it. If what the government is seizing is the fruit of an illegal activity, right? So typically, right, drug cartels, they have all this cash, right? And they buy something with it, right? They buy that Ferrari, they buy that Lamborghini, it's going to be seized. The other way you can seize it if it's the instrumentality of illegal activity. So some people were saying, well, you know, what about Diddy's private jet, right? Were there any freak-offs happening there, or his LA and Miami homes? You know, obviously we know based on the testimony that most of this activity seemed to happen at hotels. There was at least one incident Jane talked about doing a hotel night at Diddy's Miami home, but we haven't seen any forfeiture yet. And obviously Diddy's taken a big financial hit because of these accusations, but he's still worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And even with probably the tens of millions he's spending on legal fees, I think he's in good shape financially.
Oh, you say you think he's in good shape?
I mean, look, I think my speculation is that victim 3, Gina, didn't show up because, you know, she received a pretty big payday. Just speculation.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're talking about what the government did in this case and you take a step back, if you're prosecuting this case, again, you got to really appreciate the possibility that one or more of your victims are going to go sideways. And, you know, they had 5 total, apparently. At least one of them is MIA. So I don't know what happened with Gina, if she was paid, she was scared, she was embarrassed. But, you know, I think he still has significant money to pay Agnifilo Steele and his version of a dream team, plus the inevitable appeal. He's not your typical criminal defendant.
Yeah. And Dante, just adding on to that about going sideways, I am in no way saying that this is going to happen or happen, but do you have to wonder and there's been testimony by quote unquote fixers that Sean Diddy Combs employed. So do you have to have some sort of antenna up if you're the judge and or the government that, you know, someone from his team's trying to get to the jurors potentially?
Well, given the arguments that the prosecution has been making since day one, that Sean Combs is using his wealth, his influence, his connections, all of his resources to, intimidate witnesses and continue to do so even while he was in custody, it's clearly on the judge's radar and not beyond their thinking that could be happening. And that's why a witness doesn't show up. You know, of course, the defense is saying they didn't show up because they're lying. They're lying through their teeth and we were going to expose them. Or they found out we have the discovery now, just like they've been doing with the other witnesses. They get up there, they cry, they could barely talk and, you know, through their pain. And then when the defense has their turn to ask them questions, all of a sudden it's a much different, at least from what we're hearing. I defer to our madam journalist to tell us what's really going on in terms of a temperature check in that courthouse. But from what I'm reading, it appears that the dynamics change when people are being confronted with text messages and things like that, or voice memos between the two. So you may just have somebody, as Nima said, who might say, hey, you know what? I don't want to suffer through that embarrassment. However, we do see that the court is allowing people to come in under Jane Doe and pseudonyms in order to hide or protect their identity. So, you know, there's a way and a method to protect someone's identity who's a victim, but still allow them to have their day in court.
Yeah. Lauren, I think you wanted to jump in when Nima was talking. Am I right? Am I wrong? I thought I saw a little. Oh, okay.
I don't know. Oh, well, the only thing is when he said that about Gina, I just remember hearing in court, they said Gina wasn't answering and her attorney wasn't answering either, which is where I was like, oh, that must mean she got paid off. If her attorney's like, I'm out of here. So I don't know. That was just a thought. I disagreed with him.
Yeah. Interesting. It's going to be interesting to get the scoop, I think, once this trial is over. But Lauren, since you kind of teased ahead to this, so aside from the juror number 6 being let go and the possibility that there's another juror treading in dangerous waters, the other big story today was the jurors saw this different clips of sealed quote unquote freak off videos. This is obviously very explicit, and apparently the reactions were quite interesting. So walk us through that moment in court when these videos were shown. Imagine your job as a juror getting paid like $3 a day. I know it's more than that. And you got to sit there and watch these. You got to watch these $40 a day. You got to watch these freak off videos. But Lauren, what was that like?
Well, just to be clear, we don't know for sure, but what happened was the prosecutor played 3 videos. 2 videos were around 11 minutes. The last one was 39 minutes. They played about a minute and a half of each video. And the first video and the last video really didn't elicit much of a reaction from the jury. But the second video, sorry, I'll just say we're sitting there, in the press section, and all of a sudden you could hear something. And I was like, oh, I hear moaning or something, but I don't know. So I look around me and everybody, this girl next to me is like elbowing me. And I was like, oh shit, yes, that is moaning. So we start looking at the jury.
Hold up. But they're wearing headsets, right?
Yes. But so one of the men, and I just noticed this, he kind of had it off his ear. And I was like, there's no way it's that loud that we can hear that. But somehow, if enough of them had it halfway off the air, we heard moaning. I know it. I mean, it was clear as day. And there was one older female juror who did not want to watch. She was like kind of covering her eyes, horrified. But the men, I'm not even being like a jerk. They were just like, I'm not kidding. They really didn't have much of a reaction. They just weren't looking away. That's what I noticed, that the men were like, and the woman was like, no, thank you. But that's really all I could see from where I was sitting. But I know what I heard in that second video, sex noises.
And right there is the gender divide right there. The men are watching intently and the women are looking away. I got to ask you, do we know, I assume this stuff was not pixelated. Do we know if this was raw video?
I have no idea. I mean, they were trying to be so careful. They wouldn't even let the defense watch it because we had views of their screens. So I have no idea.
Yeah. And that, Dante, that was going to be my next. And by the way, again, to my earlier points about being frustrated personally as a journalist that this stuff is not on camera. Now they've heard about these freak offs for 6 weeks, Dante, and now they are literally watching them. That is a huge shift in the paradigm here. Now they're literally seeing it play out. I think, personally, I think that's going to have a huge impact. You already heard the reaction from the women. But the attorneys themselves were not allowed to watch. Is this an incredibly unusual circumstance within a courtroom for this to happen this way?
I'm surprised that the court hadn't already thought through this issue, because they know that the attorneys submit an evidence list or an exhibit list to the court in terms of the different items of evidence that they may want to, or different exhibits they might want to use as evidence during the course of the trial. Everyone knows where these screens are at. The court sets them up. So I'm a little surprised that they still had this issue in terms of not allowing the defense to see it in court. However, the defense has already seen it. They should have received those tapes in the course of their discovery, which is when they're exchanging information. So it's not as if the defense doesn't know what's on those tapes. However, we've all, as attorneys and just in our own private lives, things that you see, hear, or might watch in your comforts of your home or where you're comfortable at play and sound much different in a courtroom where it's echoing and you're watching other people watch what you're also watching versus watching it by yourself. So that's an interesting dynamic. And I would just say this too about those tapes. I'd be interested to see, not necessarily the tapes themselves, but you're going to watch the jurors' reactions as different things are going on those tapes, because we had testimony from witnesses saying, well, Cassie was directing me what to do. She was correcting me on how to do it appropriately or how she wants it done. So, those are the type of things that if you're listening and you're watching and you're doing it in real time with the jury, you could then see what they're actually responding to. So, that'd be an interesting tidbit for the defense, because in closing or maybe at some later point in time, you would want to then hone in on those portions of the videotape in order to help your case.
By the way, Dante, I got to ask you, because on the East Coast, especially here, not to veer off, the COE is going to yell at me, but is the Karen Reed case, which is going on in Dedham, Massachusetts, is that something that anyone in California is paying attention to?
Yeah, maybe
Not
some
really.
Boston transplants, Northeasterners, but it's not getting a lot of play out here. I mean, the first time, the first trial leading up to it, because to see the amount of people supporting a defendant out front and it's a police conspiracy, keep in mind, I'm probably a little bit more biased towards it because a lot of my practice at this stage of my career, 20 years of practice in law and trying cases, I do a lot of police misconduct cases. So, for talk about a police conspiracy isn't so far-fetched to me. But at the same time, I don't think Karen Reed gets as much play out here as Diddy.
Yeah. So the attorneys weren't allowed to watch. You just heard because their monitors, they just didn't want anyone else in the courtroom to catch a glance of it. And Dante, right back to you on this. And then, by the way, Nima's got to run a minute, so I'll give him a question in a second. But Wesley John Holmes, who is an Aussie living in Tokyo, jurors may feel intimidated also by Diddy's reach and then render a not guilty verdict too. What about that, Dante? I mean, this is a guy, again, that we've seen torch Kid Cudi's car, although the actual DNA evidence linking him is not necessarily there, but the intimation is. But he's got a far reach and he's a powerful guy. So what about jurors being afraid to convict someone like this? Is that a real concern?
I mean, it is a concern. How real it is I think personalized to a particular juror and how they see Diddy and whether or not they think someone who is facing federal charges, is sitting in federal custody, is then going to do something to them, which would then get him in even more hot water. And they'd also be able to write their book, shoot their movie, and also sue him like the other, get in line like the other people who are looking for a payday. I just think that would be very, very stupid on Diddy's behalf to do anything that even gets close to that. Because if they can't get you on this case, they'll get you on that one. So I just think that would be a very bonehead move. And I'd imagine his counsel have already told him many times, stay as far away from any conversation or anything that could even be perceived as being intimidating a witness or a juror.
I will say that I don't think Mr. Nobody is speaking for all men, but maybe he is. $40 COE just took it off in a porn movie. Not bad. Haha, Mr. Nobody. All the taste works. So again, men are from what is it? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Is that it?
Yes.
So Nima, what are your thoughts on that? On Sean Diddy Combs's sort of power, his reach, his celebrity? Could that intimidate some of these jurors potentially? And your thoughts on these videos being played? How important, how effective are those going to be for the government?
Yeah, I mean, look, the celebrity factor looms large. Doesn't matter if it's civil or criminal case. Celebrities do well in this country, and I've represented celebrities, I've sued celebrities, and that's just the reality. I mean, jurors, we talked about, they're ordinary people. They're going to be starstruck. Now, as far as intimidation, look, it's also a very real possibility or a payoff, right? I prosecuted drug cartels. Jurors were afraid, what's going to happen if I convict this person? Is he, usually it's a he, going to come after me or my family? So I'm not saying that that is the number one concern, but I'm sure that Diddy being in custody certainly puts people's mind at ease. And look, there's always the possibility of a payoff. It can be a witness, it can be a juror. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but that's the reality in a case like this. You have to consider the celebrity factor, wealth, and potential threats or intimidation. Look, Mia was offered a payoff after Cassie filed her lawsuit, right? She said, I'm going to take care of my own debt. That was testimony from just today, right? We heard text messages to Jane where Diddy was threatening to send the videos to the father of her child, right? We heard Cassie's mom testify that Diddy threatened to send the videos to her work. So he was taking his videos not just for his sexual pleasure, but to maintain control of the victim. So that's all really important. With respect to the videos themselves, the way it works is the parties will usually get together. If they can stipulate or agree to the evidence, it's going to come in. If they can't, then the judge has to rule on it. But all of these clips, they've all been identified. They've been cut in advance. This is not something that's happening in real time. So believe me, all those defense lawyers, they've seen the video, but they didn't get paid $40 to do so.
On that note, celebrities, they get starstruck when they go to Nima's office, which they often do. The guy graduated from UCLA. Forgive me, Nima. I almost slipped there. Age 19, graduated Harvard Law, 22, and all-around great guy, and gives really amazing commentary. Thank you for being here, Nima. I know you've got to jump. And,
Thanks,
yeah.
Joel, Lauren, and Dante. Great being on with you. I'm sure we'll be on again soon. Bye,
Yeah, see you soon. And I promise we'll wrap in just a few with Dante and Lauren. So, just back to these video clips of Dante. I mean, I guess just to follow up on what Nima was just saying, you know, is it crucial to actually see them? We've heard all about them, and people have imagination. So why take that next sort of leap of faith to say, okay, you got to watch this stuff now?
Because we learn so much from what we can observe from all of our senses. You know, we, as a common phrase is, you know, a picture says 1,000 words, right? Well, you know, what is a video? How many words are a video? Because you can get so much from that. It's the body language, it's the tone, it's the words that are being said, it's the way in which people are touching or moving and interacting with one another. Gives you an idea. Does this person look threatened? Does this person look like they're, you know, out of their mind off drugs? Or does this person look like someone who's also a participant and perhaps a director in this, as it's been tabbed, elaborate sex parties or sexual performances? So I think you have to show the video so that the jury has the best evidence. And that is a legal principle. They should have the best evidence. And the best evidence, when you have physical evidence like a video, that is it, because physical evidence, the memory doesn't fade, and it's not biased towards the prosecution or the defense. It just is what it is when you push play on the video.
Very well said. And that is true. Lauren, just if you can sort of give us some more detail, because there were text messages shown today, and I believe it was from Sean Combs asking Cassie Ventura, and I quote here, want to celebrate Christmas and have a freak off tomorrow or Friday.
Mhm.
He had the holiday cheer, I guess, but just in a different way. I read that and I was like, whoa. What was going on here at this point in court?
I mean, there was a lot of text messages shown to us today. The majority were from KK's phone, Christina Coram, who was his chief of staff and his right hand. That was just one example of Diddy asking Cassie about a freak off. And this was actually after Christmas. I believe it was January. So they were like celebrating Christmas or a holiday together. But there was another text we saw where Diddy said, you know, are you ready for tonight? You know, the freak off tonight. And she said, yes, I just have to get some stuff. And he was like, you know, you had all day to get stuff. You haven't gotten it yet. Man, it's always something. Just really berating her. And then, you know, we saw a lot of text messages between Cassie and the escorts where she would set up a freak off. She would tell them the hotel room. She would tell them the number, the name, and then the government would show the invoice from the hotel corresponding with everything that she said. So I think today was really about, you know, proving what is on the indictment with tangible evidence, because obviously we've seen some text messages and we've heard a lot of witness testimony, but we haven't seen a lot of these receipts, which is what came in today and which will come in tomorrow as well as Wednesday, I believe. In addition to the last personal assistant that will testify, that's Brendan Paul.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. Conversely here, Dante, Jane, we see some of Jane's texts. She, went by a pseudonym. She is, I guess, a social influencer who's Sean Combs's former girlfriend. Now, she sent a Valentine's message saying, and I quote here, "I'm excited to surprise him." And there were photos of a romantic hotel setup. Again, this kind of brings us back full circle, I guess, which is, there's like a push and a pull here. There's these women being completely turned off, literally being physically and verbally abused, but then going back. And there is such a thing as a cycle of violence here. But I guess my question is, if you're the government, how do you drive home the point to the jurors who are going to decide this, that is actually a real thing, that there is this trauma bonding, that it's not that easy to get out of these relationships, because some might mistake it for something totally different, which is consent.
Sure. That's a huge issue here in this trial. And that's why the prosecution brought in the expert witness. And they brought her in early in the trial in order to kind of lay the foundation and shape the way jurors were to see this type of evidence, so that it contextualizes it, saying, hey, you know what? This behavior is consistent with someone who's been abused. They've trauma bonded. They actually fall in love with their abuser and want more abuse. That's what the expert kind of comes with. But I would be surprised if Diddy didn't have his own expert coming into trial to actually undermine the credibility and poke holes in what the prosecution expert has said. We as attorneys, we call that the battle of experts. And I'd imagine for him to have such a well-financed and his own dream team, if you will, I'd be very surprised if they don't have their own expert who's going to come in and contextualize and try to undermine what the prosecution has already kind of put in place.
Yeah, and Dante, I got to ask you. I mean, we were talking about this probably a week ago. What do you think? Any chance that Sean Diddy Combs takes the stand in this case, or no way?
I don't see it at this point. In fact, I wouldn't see him doing that unless it was like very desperate times and measures. And some people might think it already is. I think this is why this case is pretty fascinating, because some of the things that people talk about or whisper about or might not even say anything about, but how they view domestic violence, sexual violence, greed, money, power, and what the limits of all of those things and how they interact and intermix, and then how they play out in everyday life is something that's on full display here. But people tend to have very, I think that they're pretty stubborn, if you will, in the way that they see the world. And so, and there's data out there that shows people reject things that aren't consistent with the way they see the world, even in the face of facts to the contrary or otherwise.
Yeah, very well said. Lauren, to you, what's the word inside the courthouse? Any chance that Diddy takes the stand?
No way. There's no way. No, I don't think so. It would be silly, because I always go back to the Kid Cudi thing where it's like so obvious that it was him, but then it's like there's that little bit of doubt because of the police reports and because they did a great job with Cross that day. They could just point blank ask him, and hopefully he wouldn't perjure himself, but that would just shoot him right in the foot.
Yeah. So you mentioned a guy named Brendan Paul. He is testifying under immunity, invoking the Fifth tomorrow. What can we expect from this person?
So we've heard his name a couple times, and most recently it was about this iPad. That was this business iPad that Diddy had at his house. But one of the assistant that was testifying, Jonathan Perez, we heard this recording during his testimony that Christina Karam recorded of Jonathan Perez talking about, I believe it was Brendan Paul or maybe another assistant, but Brendan was a part of this, finding this iPad and seeing a video of Jane on it having intercourse with another man and Diddy watching. And KK was trying to get to the bottom of it, saying who saw this. Brendan's name was brought up. I think the chef's name was brought up, and it was kind of like this whole thing. And so just to your question, I believe Brendan was a more recent personal assistant, meaning that he worked for Diddy most likely up until 2023, 2024, and had dealings with Jane, because this assistant we heard from did have a lot of Jonathan Perez had a lot of communication with Jane.
Someone just mentioned Tootsie Roll in the chat, which just gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Ugh.
But so Lauren, the government said they are wrapping this week. They said sometime between Wednesday and Friday. What do you think? And your final thoughts from inside, not right now, but every day you've been inside the courtroom. So your final thoughts on that?
Yes, they actually said Wednesday they should wrap. I thought it was going to be Friday for sure. And then at the end of the day today, they pretty much said they're going to finish with this special agent by tomorrow morning. The cross should be very short. Then we'll have one more summary witness and Brendan Paul. That'll take us through Wednesday. And there's no court on Thursday, and there's a half day on Friday. And the defense has already said their first witness on Friday is going to be Vashta. I forget the last name, Vashta, and she was the HR person at Bad Boy. So, and this whole time, the government has really painted Vashta out to be this fake HR person, like meaning like she was running some fake HR department that really just suspended people when Diddy, said, hey, they did something wrong, so suspend them without pay. So I feel like they're gonna have her come in and be like, nope, this was the deal.
And final question, because it just came up from Jennifer Reynolds. Do we know why Christina Coram, who is kind of Diddy's like right-hand woman, why is she not testifying, or is she going to testify for the defense?
That is such a good question. And I was talking to somebody today that is in the courtroom that's been working on the case since day one, and he will not tell me anything, but he did tell me that I was wrong on something that I thought about with KK. Number one, she won't be testifying because her testimony would take a week. So that's not happening. Why? I don't necessarily know, but I was surmising that maybe she flipped very early on, because there are recordings that we heard on her phone from 2023, right after Cassie's lawsuit. And these recordings appear to be kind of not great for Diddy, just talking to Jane and this and that. So I was thinking maybe she worked out some kind of deal very early on, but he told me I was wrong. So I have no idea why she wouldn't testify. No clue.
Well, Lauren, thank you very much. I know you're holding down the fort. Lauren Conlon, she's been in the courtroom since day one of the Diddy trial. She also does investigative reporting, freelance reporting for the one and only Nancy Grace. And she's got 60 episodes on this Grant Solomon story out of the Nashville area, which is an interesting case. So check it out. A big shout out to Nima, who is here. And of course, you've got Adante Pointer, apparently related to the Pointer sisters out of the San Francisco Bay Area, which is pretty cool. He's an award-winning, nationally recognized attorney. He's been representing families for the last 20 years, as you heard him say, and where was this? I just saw something. You were on the cover of Super Lawyers, an article entitled "A Fight with Him," which recounts Adante's long history of fighting for families in police abuse and personal injury cases. Please don't tell me this is a hung jury with Reed, but if it is, maybe she'll come back and get you for round 3, which I won't watch that. Which I won't watch that round either. But Adante, your final thoughts here. How long do you think the defense case in chief goes? What do you think the outcome is of this trial? If you want to give us your betting odds.
That's a good question. If I had a crystal ball, and I'm going to rub my imaginary one, I think the defense is going to pull out all the different, friends of these accusers if they have this evidence from them, okay, saying, hey, she was actually down for all of this. She talked about how she liked the lifestyle. She loved Diddy, how she was in it for the money or for the bag or for the purse or whatever it is. That if I'm the defense attorney in strategy, I'm certainly going there to undermine the idea this was coercion or force or something that was being lauded over their heads. But, if he doesn't have that type of ammunition, it's going to be a very, very short defense case, and we'll be to the jury with the verdict because, the government is always, as I say, skiing downhill. They built the case. They had the evidence before the defendants knew what was coming. So it'll be tough on Diddy to get out of this one. But
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that I think he's going down on every charge. I think he'll.
not. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's going to be tough. This is the case to me that's ripe for a mistrial because in federal court you must have a unanimous verdict.
Interesting.
I said that too, Joel. Remember, I texted you that last week. We have
Yeah.
the same opinion. Yes, Mr. You're hung.
But I mean, a 99% conviction rate. So the government, apparently in 2024, their conviction rate went up to 99%. So, but I guess if there's one person that can beat it, it's probably Sean Diddy Combs. But from the sounds of it, he's not the greatest human being on earth. But we'll see how it all plays out. Great to have Dante. I do this to the people who are great first-time best guests. Will you come back on for a different story?
Absolutely, or even this story.
Yeah, we'll get you back on. And
this
I see
is
those.
the story that keeps on giving.
It is for sure. And happy belated Father's Day to you. I see the pictures of your family. And happy Father's Day to everyone out there. Thank you all for being here. We'll see how it plays out. Love you, America. Love you, San Francisco, Oakland, the Pointer Sisters, New York City, and the Republic of Ireland, Australia, Ohio. I've been yelled at for not shouting out Ohio. Dead and Mass, we shouted out. And who else? Miami. Carmen's back in the house. She's back from the Holy Land where things are going haywire. Yeah. So we'll see you all. Guests, stick around 1 second if you can for me.